the chocolate chip cookie. Very few treats take me right back to my childhood like this little round disc. I have fond memories of summer afternoons playing with my friends, and then I would walk home and discover piles of freshly made chocolate chip cookies in the kitchen waiting with some ice cold milk. Great memories brought to me by a cookie. That being the case, it is a shame that so many Americans have outsourced their cookie making to large corporations in far-off lands who produce sorry imitations of the great American chocolate chip cookie. I say we can do better. We don't need to settle for second-class status in the cookie department. We can make great cookies in our own home. Armed with a little bit of baking knowledge and a touch of science, we are going to make a tasty, great American chocolate chip cookie. And it's easy to do. So I hope you'll join us today on In Search of Flavor as we tackle the great American chocolate chip cookie. Before we get into the baking portion of our program, let's take a moment and consider the history of the chocolate chip cookie. Lights! The chocolate chip cookie truly is an American invention. As the story goes, American chef Ruth Graves Wakefield invented the chocolate chip cookie seemingly by accident when, as she was making sugar drop cookies, she decided to add some chopped up chocolate, thinking that the chocolate would melt and make chocolate cookies. That didn't work out so well for the old girl, and she ended up with the chocolate chip cookie. Good thing for us. The cookies were a big hit with the customers at the Toll House Inn, where she was the chef. Word spread far and wide about her cookies, but it didn't reach critical mass until World War II, when soldiers from Massachusetts started receiving care packages containing the cookies and shared them with the other men they were serving with. Soon, many of these men were writing home and requesting Toll House cookies, and Ruth Graves Wakefield was inundated with requests for her recipe. Nestle got wind of the hubbub and made an agreement with Wakefield. You give us the recipe to print on our chocolate chips, and we will give you free chocolate chips for the rest of your life. The rest, as they say, is history. There are, of course, many variations on that story, but that's the one that I am going to go with. What do you think, Pops? I think you're an idiot. Thanks. Love the support. Okay, for the cookware to make your cookies, you are going to need a stand mixer or handheld beater, 2 sheet pans sprayed with non-stick cooking spray and covered with parchment paper, a mixing bowl, a whisk, a spatula, measuring spoons, an oven set to 375 degrees Fahrenheit an hour before you plan to bake your cookies. That is about 190 degrees Celsius if that's how you roll. Well, of course they need an oven, you dummy! See what I mean? You're an idiot! Seriously? Okay, on to the ingredients. The ingredients for your cookies are not so simple, and the reason is because cookies, unlike any other baked good, are most like that nutjob lunatic you dated when you were in high school. They are incredibly sensitive, and the reason they're so sensitive is because their moisture content is so low. Because of that low moisture content, any changes in any of the ingredients at any level can have an adverse effect on your cookie and rain on your cookie parade. So, how do we fix this, you ask? Easy. Weigh your ingredients. Get a scale, weigh out your ingredients before you get started, and if you're following a recipe, follow it to the letter. If it calls for bread flour, use bread. If it calls for all-purpose, use all-purpose. And try to replicate the recipe as closely as you can. This will up your chances for cookie success. He finally said something half intelligent. Will wonders never cease? Are you done? Another thing to consider is what kind of cookies do you like? I prefer chewy cookies. My son prefers cakey cookies. But how do we go about getting 2 kinds of cookies out of the same batch of cookie dough? Well, bummer. We can't. We have to make 2 different batches. But today, since I'm doing the baking and I prefer chewy cookies, we are going to go with the chewy cookie recipe. For your chewy cooking ingredients, you're going to need 1 stick of unsalted butter at room temperature, 6 ounces of all-purpose flour, 6 ounces of chocolate chips, 3½ ounces of light brown sugar, 1½ ounces of granulated sugar, 1 egg at room temperature, 3/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla extract, 2 1/2 tablespoons of milk, and 1/2 teaspoon each of salt, baking powder, and baking soda. Okay, so let's get started making our chocolate chip cookies. First thing we want to do is take our flour, our salt, baking soda, and baking powder, and put them into our mixing bowl. Once we have that in the bowl, we whip out the whisk, and we're going to stir well to combine all those leaveners with our flour. Once you have that done, set it aside and grab your stand mixer or handheld mixer. And into your mixing bowl goes your 1 stick of room temperature butter, your brown sugar, and your granulated sugar. Lower the paddle attachment on your mixer or with your hand mixer and mix this until it's creamy on medium speed, about 2 or 3 minutes. Every cookbook ever made refers to the creaming method when you're making cookies or cakes. This is the creaming method. Once our mixture is well mixed, we are going to go ahead and take our spatula and scrape the bowl down. Lower your head again, and with it running on low speed, let's go ahead and add the egg, our vanilla, and our 2½ tablespoons of milk. Once that's together, put your machine on low and add your flour. Mix it just till it comes together. Once it's together, let's bring the chocolate chips and mix till just combined. There we have it. Looks pretty good. Okay, with our dough complete, I use a tablespoon to measure out my dough. I just stick it in the bowl and grab a tablespoon's worth of dough, and on to our prepared sheet pan it goes. I like to cook my sheet pans of cookie dough 1 at a time. You can do 2 at a time if you'd like to. If you do put more than 1 in your oven at a time, I would spin the pan halfway through cooking time to get an even cook. I just do 1 at a time. I'll set my timer for 8 minutes. And at the end, we will have golden, delicious chocolate chip cookies. You can also tell with your nose when you begin to smell them, they're probably done. Let's stick these in the oven. If you're patient and want to turn up the flavor dial on your cookies, one of the things you can do is take your cookie dough, wrap it in some plastic wrap in a log, and put it in your refrigerator for 1 to 3 days. Your flavor will be greatly enhanced. I'll be back. With our cookies baking away in the oven, let's consider for a moment exactly what's going on in there. Our little balls of dough are going through a lot of changes as they take their thermal journey from raw to done. What changes, you ask? Good question. Let's find out. The first thermal stop on our road to cookiedom is 92 degrees Fahrenheit. At 92 degrees, the butter in our cookie melts. When the butter melts, we get our little ball of dough. This is my ball of dough. Excuse my art skills. It wasn't my strong point in school. Our little ball of dough flattens out. This is called the spreading of the cookie, and it happens when the butter melts. The next thermal stop on our way to cookiedom is 144 degrees. The proteins in our cookie go through a myriad of changes at 144 degrees. If we consider the chicken egg that we have put into our cookie dough, it has proteins. Those proteins are all coiled up and balled up. When we apply heat to those proteins, they denature, or they loosen up, and they let their hair down, so to speak. When they loosen up, they have all these arms that are sticking out, and the arms touch other arms and they form a mesh. This mesh causes our cookie to have structure, and that's what happens at 144 degrees. The next thermal stop on our way to cookiedom is 212 degrees. At 212 degrees, the water in our butter evaporates, turning into water vapor and escaping the cookie, leaving behind little empty pockets to give your cookie that nice structure that it has when you bite into it, and it has that nice mouthfeel. Also, at 212 degrees, our chemical leaveners kick in and let off some CO2, which also assist in giving us a more open, crummy texture for our cookie. The next thermal stop is 310 degrees. At 310 degrees, we have the Maillard reaction. The Maillard reaction is a reaction between proteins and sugars in our cookie that gives it that nice brown flavor on the outside. The Maillard reaction is also responsible for a lot of tasty goodness in the culinary world. Seared steaks, yum, and roast turkey and chicken being just two of them when they turn brown on the outside. The Maillard reaction, 310 degrees. One more stop before we get to cookiedom, and it is, well, our last stop is actually a number of stops, and the one word that encompasses it all is caramelization. See, different sugars caramelize at different rates. Caramelization, of course, is when sugar molecules break down, giving us, well, caramel. But each sugar type breaks down at a different temperature. So you can see we go from 230, most of our sugars break down in the 320 degree Fahrenheit range, including galactose, glucose, and sucrose, but maltose down here is at 356 degrees Fahrenheit. This is why I am always weary of cookie recipes that bake at 350 degrees, because what about maltose? Do we not want to break it down and caramelize it for the goodness that it provides our cookie? I always bake my cookies at 375 degrees. And that, my friends, is our thermal journey to cookiedom. So what does all this information tell us? It tells us that our simple, tasty cookies have a lot of complicated chemistry stuff going on right there in the oven.
That's funny, because there's nothing complicated going on in your head.
There goes our timer. Just in time, too, because my nose is telling me that the cookies are probably done. Like I said, your nose is a very valuable instrument, and it can pretty much tell you when your cookies are done. So it's time, I say, to pull the ripcord on those cookies and get them out of the oven. When your little mounds of luscious goodness, otherwise known as your cookies, come out of the oven, leave them in the pan for about 2 minutes, and then we will move them off to a wire rack. This is so much better than anything you're going to get down at the supermarket. Do yourself a favor, grab this recipe, spend an hour at home, and make yourself the great American chocolate chip cookie. You'll be glad you did. Keep 4 things in mind when you make your cookies at home. Number 1, set your oven to its appropriate temperature, 375, 1 hour before you are ready to bake. Number 2, take out your milk, eggs, and butter and bring them to room temperature. That will help you out. Number 3, portion size appropriately. I use a tablespoon, use whatever you like, but try to get your cookies all the same size so they cook and they are done at the same time. And number 4, and probably the most important one, have yourself a big glass of milk ready on the standby. So when your cookies come out, you're ready to chow the house. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, why not go ahead and give it a thumbs up? If you really liked it, go ahead and subscribe. We have new videos coming all the time, and I would hate for you to miss anything coming along right here on In Search of Flavor. Because as we search for flavor, we certainly are finding it, and we found it big with chocolate chip cookies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Where'd you go, dummy? Where are my cookies? Where are my cookies, dummy? Hey, dummy! Dummy, where you at?